Hi there, Nautilus owners. Today in your 2019 Lincoln Nautilus, we're going to be taking a look at and showing you how to install Luwak's flat toe base plate. The base plate is one of 5 main components you'll need to flat toe your Nautilus behind your motorhome. The base plate provides connection point for your tow bar, but in addition to the base plate, you'll also need your tow bar, which is the connection between your vehicle and your motorhome. Your safety cables, which is a supplemental connection in addition to your tow bar. Your diode wiring or magnetic wiring lights, which will take all the lighting signals from your motorhome, transfer them to the lights at the back of your vehicle so people around you know your intentions when going down the road. And your supplemental braking system, which will apply the brakes that's on your vehicle to help you come to a safe stop when you hit the brakes in your motorhome. And this is what our base plate looks like when it's installed. It fits very nicely in with our front fascia, and you almost don't even know that it's there, so it doesn't detract from the looks of the vehicle. You'll have your tow bar connection point on each side, as well as safety chain loops. Additionally, your base plate provides mounting locations for your wiring, as well as for your breakaway switch. When you're ready to connect your tow bars, slide in the inserts that come included with your base plate. Twist them until they lock into place. We're going to do that on both sides, and this will allow us to hook up any Luwak's tow bar directly to this attachment. Your Luwak's tow bar will line up just like that, insert the pin, and lock it in. If you have a non-Luwak's tow bar, you can find adapters available here at etrailer.com. Once you've got everything connected, you can place your vehicle into tow mode and hit the road. Do expect to give yourself plenty of time to complete this installation, and also make sure that you've got a lot of fresh drill bits on hand in order to get it on. That being said, once it is on, it does have a very good look. It's a great option, especially if you have existing Luwak's equipment that you want to use. But if you're looking for an easier installation that's also going to look great like the Luwak's, I'd highly recommend Roadmaster's Direct Connect base plate, as it's going to save you a lot of time getting it installed. We'll begin our installation underneath the hood by removing all the push pin fasteners located across the top here on this black piece. There's a total of 16. All the pins removed the same. You'll see the pin here. It's a 2-piece pin. The center of the pin will actually pop out, so you place your blade underneath the flat spot, lift up. Once the center piece is popped out, you can remove the entire pin. We're going to repeat that for the remaining 15 pins. Once all the pins are removed, we can take our panel up and set it aside. Underneath that panel, we're going to reveal 7 bolts we're going to need to remove using a T20 Torx socket. Our base plate is installed behind the fascia, so there's a lot of hardware on your Nautilus that we'll have to remove in order to get that off so we can get behind there. We're now in our wheel well on the driver's side. We need to remove all the pins located here. We're going to use our removal tool, and these are just like the ones up top. They just have a larger center pin, but they remove in the exact same way. You just got to find the slot, put your screwdriver or trim panel tool between it, pop out the center, and then pull out the pin. There's a total of 5 we're going to need to remove from here. This is the second lowest. There's one actually a little lower to there. Once all the driver's side pins have been removed, we're going to move over to our passenger side and repeat the same process. With all of the pins removed, that'll allow us to pull out on the trim piece here, and then pull back on our fender liner so we can gain access behind it. Once you've got your fender liner peeled back, we're going to remove the bolts located behind it. There are 3 of them that run down the line, and you're going to use an 8mm socket to remove those. They're going to be located here where these 2 seams meet, but on the inside, because what we're doing is we're taking out the bolt that holds these 2 pieces together so we can separate the fascia. You really can't see them too well. You can kind of get your head in there a little bit. You're just going to have to feel along the seam. Once we have the 3 bolts removed on this side, we'll remove the 3 on the other side as well. We're now underneath the vehicle, and we're going to remove the undershield here. There are 12 bolts that run across the front edge all the way around. We're going to remove those using a 5.5mm socket. Once those are removed, we go towards the middle a little more. You'll have 2 more bolts. There's 1 on each side, but these we're going to use a 7mm socket. And then in the open pocket, you'll also have a 7mm bolt that we're going to take off on each side. And then towards the back side of your undershield, we'll have push pins, one on each side that we're going to need to remove. These are just like the ones that were in your fender liner. And then attached to your mud flap, you'll have 2 bolts that we'll need to remove with a 5.5mm socket. We're going to do this on the other side as well. Then we can just take our panel down. There's some hooks in the front. You just have to slide towards the rear to release those. And we'll set this aside. Located across the bottom of the fascia, we'll find 3 pins that was hidden underneath our undershield. We'll need to remove those. With these, it's probably easiest if you go underneath the fascia and then pry outward. Our fascia can now be pulled off, but to make it come off a little bit easier, the trim pieces that run along the fender here, if you pull out on these a little bit, you'll see the pins located beneath. Use your trim panel tool to pop out a pin or two. Just this little bit of extra clearance will make it a lot easier getting your fascia removed. That's really all we probably need, just so we can actually get that pulled out. We can then start peeling our fascia away. We'll then pull down to release it, and then we can work our way across. If you're doing this by yourself, you'll just stop here, go slowly. If you've got an extra set of hands, though, it'll go a lot faster, because somebody can grab the other side and tilt it out. But you want to stop once you get out a little bit and check for any wiring that you may need to disconnect. You'll have several electrical connectors located on your driver's side that you'll need to disconnect. To remove those, you'll want to push on the lock tab first to open it up, slide that, and then you can press in on the release tab and pull the connector out. There's a hose that goes to your washer bottle. You'll want to disconnect this. I'm working it off with a small pick because it's pretty tight on there. And then once you've got it most of the way off, you'll want to stop because you want something to plug that up with. If you don't have a cap to plug it off with, some other options you can use are vice grips that are needle nose, like we've got here. Put a cloth on it and you can pinch the rubber hose behind where we disconnected it. Now we can set our fascia aside where it won't get damaged. We're setting ours on a cart, but you could set it on the etrailer box that your base plate was shipped in. The temperature sensor that we revealed when we took our fascia off is located here on the driver's side. We'll need to remove the sensor and the wires, so you can use your trim panel tool to pop those out. And we're just going to do that with all the clips that we see. Until we get to the harness here where it meets back into it. At this point, we can just stop and we're just going to tuck it out of the way for now. We'll then need to trim off this plastic here. I've gone ahead and marked where we're going to be cutting. So we're just going to cut along this edge and this is going to get discarded. Before you cut it, if you've got wiring that's kind of in the way, you may want to pop it out of the plastic to just make it easier to cut it without causing any damage to the wiring. Just kind of tuck it up out of the way. And we're just going to use our cutoff wheel. We want to save the holes where our push pins will reinsert into. We'll now throw this away and then repeat the same process on the other side. Along the bottom of our shutter valves here, we want to remove the push pins here on the bottom. There's a total of 4. We'll use our trim panel tool to pop those out. Then above our shutters here, we're going to pull the plastic piece off here. This just pulls outward. So just work your way across. If there's any wiring attached to it, you'll want to pop that off. And we can just set this aside. We are going to be still using that piece. With that piece out of the way, we can then make a cut along the top side of our shutter housing, and we're going to be cutting all the way across so we can take this assembly completely off, this whole shutter housing, because it's in the way of our base plate where it needs to install. We're going to use a cutoff wheel to do that. All right, now we can take our whole housing for our shutter valve assembly off, and we're just going to discard it. We can now start drilling out holes to get our base plate installed. One of the things we're going to need is an access hole to feed our hardware in, and that's going to go in this location right here. We're going to use a 1 1/4 inch hole saw to drill that out. Once you've got your access hole drilled out in the top of the frame, you're going to come down to the black frame pieces here next to the intercooler and drill out holes in the front of those as well. We're going to be using the same size hole saw. Then next to this bolt here on your frame for your bumper beam, so it would be the top outermost bolt, we're going to drill a hole next to it all the way through. You want to be careful because there is some wiring behind it. So once you penetrate the metal, you want to try and pull back real fast to not damage anything. The holes on the side of the frame here will need to be wallowed out using a 3/8 drill bit. And due to the way the beam is designed, you're not really going to be able to go straight at it. You're going to have to come in at an angle. Even if you had an angle drill, the heads aren't going to be small enough because, I mean, the angle drill is going to have at least this on it, the chuck, and that's already too large. So just have to work at it, go slow, and just wallow them out. Now that we've got those wallowed out, we can begin getting our base plate installed on one side. We're now going to take the shorter bolts that come in our kit. These are the smaller, shorter 3/8 bolts. 2 washers, flat washers, and a nut, and we're going to be installing these by themselves. This is just a reinforcement bolt that goes into one of the holes we just drilled out. What I wanted to point out is that we're using red Loctite on this bolt, and we're going to be using red Loctite on this bolt and every bolt going forward. Placed a flat washer on that bolt, and the hole that we drilled out next to the other bolt, we're going to place it in that hole. And it's okay that our washer covers up part of the nut on that bolt there. We needed to be close enough to that bolt so that would pass through to the other side, because on the back side, we're going to place a flat washer followed by a lock washer and a nut. Then we can go back and tighten it down using a 15mm socket and wrench. We'll now prepare our base plate for installation. It's going to use the smaller bolts that come in your kit with a lock washer on it. We're going to use the Z brackets that come in our kit. And our base plate, this is our driver's side here. It's going to fit on the driver's side like this. But we need this bracket on the inside facing down like that. So we're going to take our bolt, go through the base plate, and thread it into the weld nut on our Z bracket. We're going to do the same thing using the other hole and the other weld nut on the Z bracket. We'll then tighten it down with a 15mm socket. And then torque it to the specifications found in your instructions. You can now take your base plate. We're going to feed it up from the bottom. And the holes in the side of your base plate should line up with the holes that we wallowed out. So just slide your bolts through those. And these are going to attach to the handle nuts that come in our kit. So I like to kind of just set it to where it's going to be. I know my hole is here, my access hole. So this is a good point for me to bend my handle nut so I can angle it and get it over there and attach to my bolt. I recommend doing the furthest bolt first and then the closer bolt. It's usually a little bit easier when you're trying to deal with handle nuts. We're then lining up the flat side of our handle nut with our bolt and then just threading the bolt into it. When working these in, you just have to work it around until you feel it all line up. It's a bit of a finicky process, but if you take your time, you can get it all in there. Once we got both of our bolts started on this side, we're going to repeat the same process on the opposite side, getting those holes drilled out and our base plate to this point. We can now put our cross beam in place. This is going to go from one base plate side to the other. We'll be using the largest bolts, and we placed a lock washer and a flat washer on it. We're going to slide that through the slotted hole, and that's going to go through the outermost hole at the front of your base plate. On the back side of that, we're going to place a locking nut. We're then going to come over to the other side, where we're going to do the same thing. Then for the inner holes, we're just going to be using the same hardware, but minus a flat washer. And this is where you'll need to use that slot to your advantage to kind of get everything to line up. And then on the back side of our inner bolts, we'll secure those with the lock nut as well. We can now go back with a 15mm socket and tighten down the side bolts on each side. Then we can go back and tighten on the bolts for our cross member. Now that we've got our base plate all mocked up on here, we can use it as a template to drill out and install the remaining hardware. So on each side, we're going to drill out our lower holes there using a 3/8 inch drill bit. And we're going to drill out this hole just above where your base plate arms would connect using a 1/2 inch drill bit. Again, we're doing this on the other side as well. We can then take the largest, longest bolts that come in our kit. We're going to place a lock washer on it. And this is going to slide through that front hole that we had drilled out. Then we'll take the nut plate. We're going to feed it up on the back side, line it up with the bolt, and thread it in to the nut plate. And we're just going to get it hand tight for now, and then move on and get the rest of our hardware installed, and we can come back and tighten and torque it at the end. For our side bolts, we're going to use the same hardware that we used for the upper side bolts. So just a lock washer on there. It's going to slide through the holes that we just drilled. And then we're going to use nut plates again to get it attached. The only small difference is that we're going to use the same type of nut plate we use for the upper ones for our rear hole, but the front bolt towards the front of the vehicle is going to use a smaller whiz nut style. And this is just due to the inside cavity there. The opening really doesn't accommodate this large square as it does this small nut. Poke it in our access hole and thread it on. With all of our hardware installed, we can go back and tighten it all down. And then we can go back and torque all of the hardware for our base plate to the specifications found in our instructions. And then trim off the excess for your handle nuts. The easiest way I found to do that is to use a pair of side cutters. Keep pressure on it, and while you've got pressure on it, just kind of flex it up and down, and then it'll kind of break right where you're keeping pressure. Much easier than just squeezing really hard. Your hands will appreciate it. With all of our hardware torqued down, all that's left is to wrap the cables that come in our kit around the frame of the vehicle and then attach them here with the C. You can see how I've got mine routed. I just ran it down, looped it around our subframe, and then brought it back, and then used the C-clamp to clamp the eyelet ends of the cable back to itself. And this is just a supplementary connection in the event of a catastrophic disconnect. While your fascia is removed, before you reinstall it, I highly recommend you install all of the rest of your components for your flat toe setup, such as your braking system and your diode wiring. I've gone ahead and completed all of that. So we've got our diode wiring and our braking system installed. So now we got to put our fascia back on. We have to trim out for our base plate. We also have the components in place that we need in the front that we can trim out for as well, so we can have everything nice and easy with our fascia going back on. In order to get this trimmed out, we're just going to take our fascia, we're going to hold it up there. It's going to take another person. They can hold it up while you inspect it, and then just mark on your fascia where you need to trim out, cut those out, and then retest fit. For the holes for our base plate, we're going to be using a hole saw to trim these out. I'm using a 2 5/8 inch size. It's a little bit larger than you probably need, but the issue with hole saws is once you cut it out, it's harder to step it up because you don't have your pilot hole there anymore to hold the hole saw steady. So we are going to go just a little bit larger with this hole. This way we can get a nice curve around this edge that we want to cut here when we marked around. So we're going to start in the forward motion to get the bit to puncture through. And then once the bit punctures through, we're going to switch it to reverse because it's plastic here that we're cutting. And the hole saw in the forward direction wants to dig in and bite because it's usually cutting wood or metal. But with plastic, going in reverse, it'll take out much cleaner, easier to control cuts. That is going to give you a better finish. And now for any remaining cuts you need to make for the other components, such as our wiring and stuff, you can cut out this grill using a pair of snips, or if you want, you could use a rotary tool. We can then use a file to clean up any rough edges. And then any marks you may have made, you can go back and just clean those off. Rubbing alcohol usually does a pretty good job of any kind of paint stick mark. Now we can retest fit our fascia. If we need to make any additional trimming, we'll do so. Once you're sure everything fits, you just want to take your time and reinstall it in reverse order of how we removed it. Don't forget your electrical connections and your washer hose. And now with our fascia back in place, we're all set. We're ready to go hook up and hit the road. And that completes our installation of Luwak's flat toe base plate on our 2019 Lincoln Nautilus.